Welcome back to Crimson Cast. Galen Claudio joining you once again as we get ever closer to game day here. It is college football playoff week in Bloomington as the Indiana Hoosiers taking on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And we've got Rhett Lewis back with us. We've been trying to get Rhett back on the show since the start of the season. Timing hasn't worked out, but I'm glad we were able to land him this time around. Rhett, great to have you back on. And man, I still can't believe that we're in this phase of things right now. It's just awesome. The anticipation grows on a daily basis.
It's just great to be talking about IU football the week before Christmas. You know, I mean, like it's
and it's not a coach firing, right?
Yes, correct, and it's not the Red Box Bowl.
Right.
You know, like we are in uncharted territory for sure, and that is without a doubt the most frequent question that I have gotten is like, what does this feel like? And I struggle to find the words, as you could tell. Like it's so different than anything that I've ever been accustomed to, in my lifetime. Right. Outside of maybe the flashes of it in 2020, but it didn't feel like this, right. Obviously. Yeah. And so I just I have this tremendous level of excitement, and I can't even explain how different the expectation change has been, not even like within the program, but like just from my perspective. Obviously I haven't been in the booth with Don the last 2 years. Prior to this one, it was like, offense comes back onto the field and you're like, all right, when's James Evans coming back? And unfortunately that's just how it was. And obviously it got better, the final few games of the 23 season, but there was just this kind of like impending doom that you felt every time. And now it's like we get into 3rd and 14. You're like, oh, Curtis is probably just going to hit Surratt for a back shoulder. That'll go for 20 and drive will continue and we'll probably score a touchdown and we'll probably go up by 14 points and probably going to win by 30. And like that's right. It's just, it is an expectation now that Indiana thrives in the face of adversity.
Yeah, I think the overriding emotion for IU football was dread for a long time, and it's completely different. And I think that's why so many people who have either followed the program closely, like myself, or like you, have been involved in multiple different ways officially. It's why it's so hard to put into words, because it's like the best possible version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where like I don't know who replaced your personality. Right. With this amazing soul, but here we are. Before we dive in further, just a quick reminder, folks, we're brought to you by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, and your place to go for IU CFP apparel. A ton of amazing pieces. I've got some on order. I'm hoping they get here before I drive up to South Bend on Thursday. It's a tremendous collection. Everything from kind of the traditional CFP black and white color scheme to IU specific items. If you are going to be here on Friday in Bloomington, upstairs is going to have some shirts that tie in directly to that as part of Brunch Club. So head over to homefieldapparel.com, use the code HOME23, get 15% off your first order. All right, Rhett. So I want to talk about the matchup first.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of talk about the overarching things. But I have noticed as we've gotten through the past week and into this week, this is the game that people either like they feel definitively that Notre Dame's better and that they're just going to walk, or they see something in the matchup that's giving them pause. This is probably the matchup where I've seen the most variability in terms of the predictions. I mean, from what you've seen looking at both teams, like what's your evaluation and where do you think that confusion's coming from in the pundit class?
Yeah, look, I think most people feel like Notre Dame's going to win based off reputation. I mean, like, and most people that just have kind of put Notre Dame through to the Sugar Bowl probably haven't watched a whole lot of Indiana this year, and they maybe haven't even watched a whole lot of Notre Dame. You know what I mean? So I've watched a ton of both, and I do feel like, if you're looking at ways that Notre Dame would defend an offense like Indiana, I think you look at the USC game. I think you look at the Louisville game a little bit in terms of, formations and personnel and the way they want to throw the ball, the way they can run the ball. I think for that, you can kind of look at Georgia Tech too, a little bit in the way that they played. There's other games out there as well. But the one thing that occurred to me is that, USC threw the ball on Notre Dame, and outside of the two pick sixes in the last 3 minutes of the game, which were incredible to have one go for 99 and one go for 100.
I don't think I've ever seen that in football before.
It's nuts. Like USC's receivers got open, and USC's receivers, number 0, Xavier Watts for Notre Dame is an absolute star.
Yeah.
He's a superstar. To me, he's their best player on defense and an absolute baller. He's like, he does not miss tackles in the open field. He takes on offensive linemen, and when he's trying to go after running backs in space, like he is a baller. But I think that their corners on the outside can be had, particularly number 29. I watched him, a bunch kind of, they don't run a lot of zone. This is a man team, which is a big challenge for Indiana. You got to win your one-on-one matchups. It's what you love as a wide receiver. I talked to Elijah Surratt about that this week, and he was fired up about this challenge to go out there and win. And then, even if he doesn't get on top of a DB, let's say running a go route, that's where that back shoulder with Curtis Rourke that's been lethal this year comes into play. So I think there's real opportunities for Indiana to win one-on-one matchups, to create space in the pass game. I look at guys like Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams in particular as guys who've got real wiggle at the top of their routes to create some separation in the slot. That could be a big matchup factor for IU, especially if they're in man coverage. But look, let's understand that this is a very big and physical team up front. Defensive line, they got 3 dudes with NFL bloodlines. They got Roman Oben's son. They got Howard Cross's son. Kurt Heinish's little brother plays on this team, all on the defensive front. So they are big and physical up front. It'll be a challenge for for Indiana's offensive line to kind of open up some space in the run game. But I think the running backs and maybe even Zach Horton can find some matchup problems in the pass game against the linebacking core. I'd love to get number 34 out in space for Notre Dame and kind of test them that way and see what they got. So I think if Indiana's finding ways to beat man coverage, they're going to be in a great position to put up points in this game. And then it's about stopping the run.
Right.
Stopping the run and forcing Riley Leonard to beat you. So to me, the pathway to victory is defense gets some stops early, offense puts some points up on the board, 10, 14 points early, and now you're kind of starting to force Notre Dame to think about throwing the ball with Riley Leonard.
Yeah.
And I'll just say the last point on the matchup part that way is I love Riley Leonard. I love the way he competes. I love his joy for the game, his passion for his teammates. Like the way that he plays is the right way, man. It's fun to watch. He is tough. But I will take Curtis Rourke as a passer every day of the week. And I think that's where, Indiana's got an advantage.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating thing because, it's to some degree, it's like, oh yeah, just stop Notre Dame's running game, which is very, very difficult for everybody, right. And they do that so well. But most of the success pathways for Indiana run through that, and this is where it's going to be interesting because even though Indiana clearly didn't play very well at Ohio Stadium, they did do a good job of stopping the run. They did a good job of playing in that mode.
Yeah.
And, they really forced Ohio State to move the ball through the air. And even that, Ohio State wasn't as successful as you might think looking at the final score. Yeah. Against Michigan, Indiana did the best job of anybody all season in stopping the run. And these are teams that are physically and talent-wise very similar to what Notre Dame brings to the table on that front. So a lot of it is schematic. And I think looking back and seeing, who has been successful against Notre Dame, USC, their offensive success probably should have led to a victory if not for those mistakes that they made with the interceptions and letting Notre Dame kind of establish early that they were going to try to control things. For me, a lot of it with Indiana is you've got to get off to a faster start offensively to give your defense some wiggle room because, Notre Dame's really good with explosive runs. They've been able to get some long runs pretty consistently throughout the course of the season. I worry a little bit because Indiana's offense has gotten off to slow starts. Even in the Purdue game, it wasn't like they came out and just started rattling points off immediately. In this kind of an environment, it's going to be interesting to see, can you get success in the first quarter, get 14 points on the board and establish that this is going to be a ball game.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that comes back to, the way that I see the path to victory here. Going 3 and out or, 5 and out the first couple of possessions is not going to put you in a great position. Now you're inviting the crowd to get into this game. You're inviting the elements to become a factor. You're inviting the those little seeds of, oh man, this feels like Columbus again, type of thing to come back into your head, even though they scored on the first possession in that game. But I do think that, look, a fast start is important in every game. And if you go back and look at the season on the whole, that has been one of Indiana's calling cards, is to come out with the pedal to the floor. And that is a tenet of this offense. They are they want to be a thermostat, not a thermometer team. Like, they want to set the temperature. They don't want to take the temperature of the game. You know what I mean? Like, it's truly.
I like that. I'm going to steal that for future.
Yeah.
Movies. I like that.
Yeah. And so that is something to where we're not just going to feel this thing out. It's a big game. Let's just kind of, let's kind of play it safe and see what they're going to do. No, we're going to come out and attack. Yeah. And that's why they've been so successful early on. So the thermostat will be pretty chilly early on, I think, in South Bend. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be up there, but I'm going to definitely agree with you on where this sets up nicely for IU if they start to build that lead.
When you look at what Indiana tries to do offensively, one of the problems the last month has been, there's been a clear lack of timing and sync between Curtis Rourke and his receivers. It got better in the Purdue game, and that was really exciting to see. But I hope that that's largely injury related, and that you have something like that happen with Rourke, it can throw off timing. Even the Michigan State game was really more of a running attack game for Indiana than it was a passing attack game. The timing could also be a little bit disrupted by the weather. Now, the weather's looking better now than it was when we were looking at forecasts ahead of time, because I was looking at forecasts where it's oh yeah, we're going to have wind gusts of 38, 40 miles an hour. We don't want that. Wind dies down a little bit. Now you're just playing in the cold. How does that affect the passing game in particular? Does it have much of an impact? And for a team like Indiana, with the way that they try to throw the ball, is that something they need to be worried about?
I don't think so. I mean, you saw the way that they were able to connect in that Purdue game. And, I don't think the elements are going to be anywhere near that. And now the cold is something, right? It's something to think about. I was never one to be hey, let's go shirtless for warm-ups. Let's rip off the no sleeves. No. I want to be warm. I want to be at peak optimal playing temperature, and I want to be, I don't want to sit there and be miserable for no dang reason. So I'm one of those guys. I was one of those guys that would dress warm, and you can always take stuff off if you have to at whatever point. But I think seeing the way that they were so efficient in the pass game against Purdue and those kind of elements leaves me pretty confident. Now, look, you go back to that Ohio State and the Michigan game, there were some uncharacteristic drops that we hadn't really seen pop up all year. I think they got a lot of mistakes kind of out in those two games in particular. You want to go back to special teams too. I don't think you'll see that happen again. Obviously, that was a bad time for it against Ohio State. But I think you get rid of the drops, you get rid of, the undisciplined stuff that has not been a part of this program this year. I think they're going to be just fine.
Yeah. One of the interesting aspects of this matchup for both teams is that they're kind of mirror images of each other in a lot of ways, not so much in terms of how they play, but in terms of the schedule that they've played against, their dominance against that schedule. And, people have had questions about both teams. Indiana more so because of the brand name, I think, more than anything else. But when I was talking with Taylor earlier this week and we're doing our game preview, it's amazing how strength on strength this matchup is between these two teams. Yeah. But it's hard to know fully what level of greatness both teams have, given the fact that they've accrued that largely through beating soundly the teams on their schedule. Neither team has played a tremendously hard schedule, all things considered. So when you look at this, it's a little hard to try to extrapolate, can either team, given what they've done against lesser competition, how does that apply in a game like this where you're playing a team that's finally on your level across the board? I don't know if there's a question in there per se, but I guess in your eye, when I look at Indiana, what I see is the team that's largely thrived on their execution and their efficiency. And they do everything really detail oriented. Notre Dame has really thrived, at least in part, on their athleticism and the level of talent that they've got. I'm curious, how does that end up playing out in a game where you've got superior athletes perhaps in certain positions versus a team that really relies on doing things exactly the right way every time?
Yeah, I think it's I think when you look at it and you look if you're kind of comparing matchups and you're comparing the way that Notre Dame has played against certain teams and then looking at that in like the framework of what Indiana presents to them, I think you could take certain things from certain games. Like, look at the way they defended the run against Georgia Tech, against Navy, against teams that really, like to be physical with the football on the offensive side, and their defense was up to the challenge there. But the thing that I think, again, Louisville put up points and yards on them in the past game. Same with USC the last time we saw them. So I kind of look at this as, hey, let's not on offense, don't bang your head against the wall, and try to do what Ohio State did against, Michigan and just, try to pound the rock just because you want to prove how tough you are.
Right.
Like, let's get out there and let's go find the advantageous matchups. And I think a lot of those are going to be in the pass game early, and that could turn to the run game later. Yeah. I think a lot of people like to say, "Oh, you got to establish establish what works."
Right.
Like establish what gets first downs and scores points. And for IU in this game, I do feel like it is going to be a pass game type of situation. From a personnel standpoint, I think when you look at it, like they're going to appear probably a little bit more like Michigan in kind of like big burly type frames. I don't know that they have the speed that Ohio State did on the whole. So like you kind of grab bits and pieces from it. And I do understand, like stylistically, the way they play, the way they're led, the way they focus, like I do think there are similarities there, even though they may accomplish it in different ways, right. But the way they've executed it has been similar. But look, personnel wise, I mean, Notre Dame's been a top 20, recruiting class team for, I don't know, the last century.
Right.
So like on paper, yeah, they're going to have better personnel. But as we've seen time and time again this year, that really hasn't mattered for Indiana.
I guess last thing, offensive line obviously had their issues against Ohio State. No issues against Purdue, but Purdue didn't really offer a lot of resistance. A lot of that was focused on crowd noise. We heard Curt Cignetti talk about that a bunch. When you look at this offensive line, they've been so good all season. They obviously suffered the loss via injury at the left guard position. That didn't help. But are you worried about Indiana's offensive line in this game as they go up against especially Notre Dame's interior line? And does Indiana, in your opinion, need to change the way they approach the passing game above and beyond whatever they're doing with crowd noise, which we'll get to in a second, to try to give both the offensive line and Curtis Rourke a better chance against a pass rush?
Yeah, look, I think that was the thing that started popping up against Michigan was that pass rush, especially in the second half. And I think Tyler Stevens, by the way, has done a really nice job. I mean, technically he is the fourth guard. Because you think Nick Kidwell was penciled in to start from the beginning and never played it down, unfortunately, due to the injury. Then you get Evans in there and he goes down kind of unexpectedly. So yeah, you're technically on your fourth guard there. The fact that Indiana's got competitive depth that way to put that offensive line together is a big deal. And so thankful that obviously you've got that kind of luxury there. I think he's played well. I think the tackles, really in that second half against Michigan, the edge pressure started to really get after him a little bit. And then, kind of the same with Ohio State, but it was more of like a physical, like kind of beat you up type of pressure with, JT Tuimoloau, with Jack Sawyer. And then they brought pressure that bothered Indiana. And I think that, Bob Bostad, my guess has been, going back for the last month now and working on those things and how Indiana deals with those types of looks. Often, I don't think that they will cause them that type of trouble. Now, if they get beat physically, it's a different thing, but I don't think you're going to see that type of, kind of confusion up there that allows some mental missed assignments. The things that worry me a little bit are, look, Howard Cross coming back is a big deal for them. I look at Josh Burnham, the guy that plays their Viper. I think the dude that comes in after him is kind of the rotation. Junior Tui Halamaka is really good as well, number 44. Donovan Heinisch, 41, played a bunch when Howard Cross was it. They kind of go 8 deep, and they're pretty good at it. So, like, that's the kind of thing. Like, they can stay fresh, so it's, it'll be, staying power for that offensive line as you get into the second half. where we saw it kind of break down against Michigan, I think will be something to watch. But I do think that they are capable of holding up and giving Curtis the time he needs.
Right.
Like, he's not going to sit back there and read a book, but like, they're going to give him the time he needs because he is a great processor of information. And a lot of that dealing with pressure does fall back on him. Get the ball out of your hands. Let's go.
Exactly. Let's widen the lens a little bit as we wrap up. So Indiana in the college football playoff, amazing story by itself. Indiana playing at Notre Dame in the first game of the college football playoff. I mean, these are two programs that have not played each other historically very much at all. Last meeting was in 1991. I mean, when you saw this matchup as an IU football alum and someone who's been tied to the program, like, what was your reaction when you saw that this was going to be the draw for Indiana?
Great question. I will, and I'm going to send this photo to you so that when I hold it up to my camera here, you're not going to see it as well, but maybe you can find a way to throw it in. I will throw this picture up and I will tell you this is our secret weapon. And I'll see if you can identify who this is in this photo.
I cannot identify who is that in the photo.
Well, it's a mock-up of Matt LaVecchio,
yeah,
former Notre Dame
I
quarterback.
forgot about that. I always forget about the LaVecchio thing.
Yeah. So 2 years at Notre Dame, led him to a Fiesta Bowl, I believe, as a true freshman, and then kind of went back and forth with Carlisle Holiday, which, by the way, his name has been in the news because Riley Leonard had back-to-back 100-yard rushing games this year, and he was the first quarterback to do so since Carlisle Holiday did it back in I think it was like 2002 or something. But LaVecchio, remember, old school, transferred to Indiana, no transfer portal, sat out a year, was on the scout team, and then became the starter for the final 2 years. Obviously, it wasn't a hugely productive couple of years in terms of wins, but had some fun moments. He's been a great friend of mine. And so, I texted him, when this matchup came out, and I was like, it's all cream and crimson this week, right? Right. It's all cream and crimson this week. And he was like, oh, absolutely. Hell, yeah. So he's going to be up there as well. And he's still got a lot of good friends that he played with at Notre Dame. But I'm going to bring, just in case, I'm going to bring some extra crimson for him.
I think
that's what I think of when I think of this matchup.
Bring him a towel.
Yeah.
He needs an Indiana towel.
No, are you coming, by the way? Are you going?
Oh, I'm going to be there. Okay. I'm getting up there Thursday. Okay. So we're setting up camp. No, but the LaVecchio thing's interesting because I remember when that happened, just being a fan. And it's like, this is interesting because these two programs rarely cross paths. And, and it's an illustration, I think, to some degree that's kind of like the last meaningful exchange between the two programs.
Well, maybe JoJo Johnson, if you want to say, but there was something there. Yeah.
Right. But it's really cool because obviously there's a big crossover in the fan base as well. For a lot of, I know. And there's been a lot of talk about the reversible jacket thing, but what having grown up in Indiana and having grown up around people who had ties to both of these, like there's so much intermingling in terms of like you got family members, like one went to Notre Dame and two went to Indiana. You've got a ton of Indiana people who live in and around South Bend. Chicago's kind of the home base for a lot of Notre Dame, but there's so many more IU people there.
Oh yeah, don't forget about IU Chicago now.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the IU diaspora is so much bigger, but in the state of Indiana, especially, these two programs nobody's had to choose. And now I'm seeing I've had several people who are like, well, I root for Notre Dame normally, but I'm rooting for Indiana in this game.
Okay, that makes me feel better because there is nothing, nothing that I despise more on this planet than someone that comes to Indiana and still roots for Notre Dame. I lived with 4 of them.
Oh, no.
That were from Mishawaka, like up near that. And I'm like, guys, you go to Indiana. If you wanted to root for Notre Dame, go the Rudy route. Go to junior college up in South Bend and then try to find your way into school up there. Leave us alone. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this hopefully this is the game to silence all that nonsense.
It would be nice, and I just think it's cool. It is as ESPN just noted today. This is the first ever in-state CFP matchup. That would have been hard to do before this, just given that there were only 4 teams, right? But it is cool that this is the first one, and it's so awesome. Like Indiana getting not just to go to Notre Dame Stadium, which is a historic venue within college football, but it's the first game of this year's college football playoffs. Friday night at 8, all the eyes on that game. College Game Day going to have a version of themselves up there. For a season that's been filled with all the pageantry of college football that Indiana's never gotten a chance to be a part of, this just feels like an even, the largest
bonus.
Cherry you could put on top.
Absolute bonus. Yeah. No, without question, Galen. Like it's just super cool, like, stylistically to think about this, right? To think about Crimson up at South Bend inside Notre Dame Stadium and, finally getting confirmation that Touchdown Jesus, was actually just the tail end of going IU, up there at South Bend. And like, there's so much history there. And now this newfound kind of like rekindling of IU football history in this new era. Like it's kind of like an old versus new, but still it feels very kind of familiar. Like there's so many kind of odd and fun and really intriguing storylines between these two schools, which haven't met since 91, and it has not been a particularly great history for the Hoosiers, but
right.
Neither has the last 20 years, and we're putting all that to bed now.
Last question for you. How excited will you be after Indiana beats Notre Dame to be able to kind of go back home to the sugar?
Oh, buddy. Oh, buddy. I'm trying to pull the Kurt Signetti here. Hey, focus, day to day, play to play, rep to rep, practice to practice. But yeah, I'd be lying if I haven't thought about that. My wife has already, tried to book a ticket to come down with me if we're able to make that trip. And man, that would be incredible, because I know that given a proper allotment of tickets, that IU fans will show up by the thousands on Bourbon Street, down in the French Quarter, down in the Warehouse District, and then inside the Superdome on New Year's Day for a Sugar Bowl matchup with Georgia.
So much to look forward to, and it all starts this Friday as Indiana takes on Notre Dame. Rhett, I hope to see you up there.
Yes.
And thanks for taking the time to join us as we continue to wind through our week of the college football playoff as Indiana takes on Notre Dame this Friday. We'll go ahead and wrap it up here, folks. Thanks for joining us. We got one more podcast before the game, so keep an eye out for that. My thanks again to Rhett Lewis from NFL Network for joining us here, and my thanks to all you folks for listening in. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. I'm Galen Clavia for Crimson Cast. Bring back the Bison. Stay never daunted. Go IU. Bye, everybody.